Hello my gorgeous makeup loving friends. So we have a new video today. It's the first impressions of some of the Lethal Cosmetics collection, specifically the new After Dark palette, which looks like this. And I have one of the highlighters. It says wavelength, but then on the back it says scatter, so I'm not really sure what the shade is, but it's a lilac-y color. And one of the liquid lipsticks, which comes in the shade Chimera, which is a red shade. So if you want to see how I came up with this look, then this is the video for you. I will also say that in this video I talk a little bit about the Stauffers. So if you don't know about what the story of the Stauffers are, they are a YouTube family, which is a weird phrase to say, but they are a family that lives their lives on YouTube. And I talk a bit about Micah Stauffer and how she adopted a child from China and all of the stuff around that. And I talk about it from the view of both a psychologist who works with kids on the spectrum, because the kid they adopted is on the spectrum, but I also talk about it a little bit from the perspective of somebody who has been adopted, because, you know, I've been adopted. Yay me. So just bear in mind there could be some stuff that could be a little bit triggering for you. So if that's something that could be a bit tricky for you, maybe like keep it on mute until the end where I'm like talking about the products, because it's mostly like a chatty get ready with me where I'm using the products a little bit but not going into like a hugely in-depth tutorial. But yeah, if this sounds like something for you, then do please keep on watching. So I'm looking fairly fresh-faced. Who would have thought it? And I have the Lethal Cosmetics After Darks collection here. We'll do some swatches at the end of the video, but for now let's have a little look-see. This is what it looks like. The outside looks like this, and they give you some stickers that you can like kind of decorate it with, which reminds me a little bit of the e.l.f. J Kiss It palette, which Elena Glam used on her channel. I will link that video down below. But like I said, this is what the palette itself looks like. Now we're having a very chatty get ready with me. The names of the shadows are, I believe, no, they're not on the back. They're on the back like this, which is strange. So I'm not going to bother like calling them out or really saying what brushes I'm using, because I want to do a sort of a chatty get ready with me. Hopefully that's okay with you. I'm going to be talking about the Stauffer family and my general thoughts on that, because I come from two different perspectives, both as a child of adoption and obviously as a psychologist who works with individuals on the spectrum. So I guess I will kind of hop straight-ish into it. Yeah? So I'm just going to take this brush here and I'm going to question my life choices. It's very early in the day. I'm going to go into this shade here. So, what is the story with the Stauffers? They are a family blogging thing. So there is Micah Stauffer. She is essentially the main person involved in that, and she was a registered nurse back in the day. So she has a medical background. Ooh, very pigmented. And she is married to James Stauffer. He also has his own YouTube channel where he does a lot of stuff like around cars and cleaning and bits and pieces like that. I've never really watched that. I've also never really watched her content either, because it doesn't really appeal to me. But she had a YouTube channel all around parenting, because she had 4 children herself, so 4 biological children. And she had a big enough channel, like way bigger than mine. Like, I mean, mine is a baby channel, but she had quite a few subscribers, but she didn't have the growth that she necessarily might have liked. And I don't want to say that this was related to it, but they decided that because they had had 4 children biologically themselves, they wanted to go off and adopt a child from China, which I think is like a nice idea. There are plenty of kids out there in the world who need loving, caring parents, and I think if you go to adopt, that's a brilliant idea. Obviously, worked out for me. I'm an adopted child. Actually, my anniversary of being adopted is coming up in November, so it's November 13th, 1990 was when I was initially adopted. I was adopted at 6 months and 10 days old, so you know, I was a very chunky baby. But they decided to go over to China to adopt a child, and they decided that not only would they adopt a child, but they would adopt a child with additional learning needs. So I'm taking the same brush again and I'm going into this pink, which is a big task. My background is working with kids with developmental disabilities such as autism. So it's no mean feat being a parent of a child with additional learning and living skills. So it's not something that you just kind of go, oh, well, we'll do that. You have to carefully think this through. And they said they did their research kind of going, well, you know, what can we deal with? And they had initially said, oh, well, because Micah's a trained nurse, she's able for all sorts. So there's very little that we're ruling out, which, like, okay, fair enough. And anyways, they said that they absolutely fell in love with this little boy called Huxley. And in fairness, if you see the pictures of him, you're like, okay, I totally get why you'd fall in love with him. He is a gorgeous looking child. And they thought he had a tumour or something in the brain, but he also had autism, or has autism. You don't get rid of autism. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which, by the way, if you want me to talk about that at some point on my channel, I'm happy to do a video talking through what is autism and what are the symptoms around it. So they went over it. Now what's interesting is, same brush again, going into this purple. Well, I personally find it interesting anyways. They didn't fund it themselves going over it. They actually had like their viewers on their YouTube channel actually fund their trip over, which I find interesting. They did a GoFundMe, and from this and just even blogging their journey over to China to find a child, they got loads more subscribers, which, like, okay, fair enough. I get why it's a hot topic. Like, a lot of people are looking into adoption and the viability of that, and maybe looking into the journey, which, you know, I think it's good to have, like, you know, a realistic expectation out there as to what exactly it involves and, you know, the commitment that it involves. But they got a lot of money out of that. And anyways, they went through the whole process and they adopted this child. And they eventually obviously brought him back to the States, and it was there that she started to kind of talk about him a lot on her channel. So they were getting far more subscribers. They were obviously getting AdSense, etc., because they had ads on the videos that he was in, and all the videos, in fairness. But to me, I always have a thing about having kids on camera, because I feel they're not in a position to consent to having their image being used and put onto the internet, so I'm very wary of that. I think particularly for a child with a developmental disorder that doesn't necessarily understand what's happening, I think it can be construed as being what's the word? And I don't want to sound mean, but it can be seen as kind of a little bit manipulative of using this person to gain things for yourself. That's just my opinion. That's just what I'm saying. Don't take it as fact. Well, they started to take videos of him in the house. Now, they had done that with their other kids as well, so it's not like they were just exclusively taking videos of him. But what was interesting was there seemed to be a sort of a difference in the way that they parented Huxley, their adopted child, versus you know, their biological children. Now, bearing in mind this is a child that was adopted at an older age, so you're already talking about a child that could have additional issues around attachment and, you know, feelings of family and belonging. He also came from a country where essentially there wasn't always access to food, so he had a lot of like food anxiety and, you know, anxiety around whether or not he was going to be eating, which is interesting in and of itself. But she would get quite emotional or annoyed with him if he was like getting obsessed around food. And the thing is, you have to be really careful when you intervene with a child with a developmental disorder who's showing issues around eating, because there can be a lot of issues around that. You need to actually have a specialist come in rather than just kind of going off on your own bat and doing whatever. So, because otherwise you can end up with like a very severe eating disorder. but she would punish his attempts to go near food when it wasn't an appropriate time, which in my view, I'm a behavioural psychologist. I work with children on the spectrum, as I kind of alluded to earlier. And we have a very, very strict code when it comes to the use of punishment. You don't really use punishment unless it's like absolutely called for. Just taking this brush and going into this shade here. So I found it really interesting that she was going straight to using time out with him, which isn't appropriate in that particular context, in my opinion. It's not what we would use in practice at all. So I just find that very, very interesting. I'm trying to be as objective as possible, because again, I'm only knowing what it is that's being put up onto like media sites and YouTube, etc., and that won't give you the full story either. I'm not going to be giving you the full story either because I don't know what the story is. But anyways, she was kind of treating him a bit differently, and she was putting him into timeout for kind of some obsessions around food, which, like I said, I personally wouldn't agree with, based upon my training, etc. As a behaviour analyst, we wouldn't do that. I am going to cut the crease, and I'm going to do that off camera because I'm going to get myself distracted if I do that on camera with you guys. So I'll see you back in a second. I've done the cut crease. We're doing pretty well. So yes, I have this Jessup 237 brush, and I'm going to go into this shade here. So in addition to that, there was also instances where, and I'm going on second-hand information on this because again, like I said, I haven't watched her channel, but she would allegedly duct tape his thumbs together so that he couldn't engage in thumb sucking. And meanwhile, there were pictures on her Instagram of her biological daughter who was engaging in thumb sucking, so there seemed to be a double standard. Now, in relation to preventing thumb sucking with an individual with ASD, I wouldn't recommend going in and punishing any sort of self-stimulatory behaviour like that. We call it self-stimulatory behaviour because the behaviour itself seems to be inherently reinforcing. But we particularly wouldn't go in and intervene on something like that with somebody who has minimal language and communication skills, because there is information to show that it serves as a means to essentially relax or decrease some of the physiological reactivity that is experienced by that person in their environment. So it's essentially something that can be done when they're feeling overwhelmed, in the same way that, you know, some people might light a cigarette or they might have a cup of tea when they're feeling a bit overwhelmed. So it's very unfair to take that sort of a coping mechanism away from a child who isn't able to express what that means to them, and that they haven't been taught any sort of alternative behaviour. Like, the only time you would really stop any sort of a behaviour like that is if it was physically damaging to them. So for instance, if they were engaging in thumb sucking to the point that it was breaking the skin, or if it was socially damaging, so if they were in a school around other typically developing kids and they were being bullied, etc. for it, you may kind of teach an alternative behaviour or kind of say, well, this is when it's an appropriate time to engage in XYZ. But the double standards were kind of talked about, and then eventually it got to a point, I'm using the same brush again and I'm going into this shade here, it got to a point where people started to notice that he was no longer being featured on their channel, and they were kind of wondering, well, what is it that's going on? Why is he no longer kind of on the platform? And they kind of shied away from that for a while, and eventually they came on, and by they I mean Micah and James Stauffer, came onto YouTube and said that actually what they had done was they had rehomed their son. That's right, rehomed, like he was like a sort of a cat or something, you know, like I wouldn't even rehome my cats, like, you know, and they're not human beings with additional needs. Now, they said that it was because he had all of these additional needs and they weren't able to help him and they couldn't afford it. Well, they didn't really say they couldn't afford it, but they kind of alluded to that at one point, and they said they didn't have the skills necessary to do this, so they have gotten him another quote-unquote forever home, which is incredibly damaging to somebody who, let's face it, probably already has an attachment issue because of the age that he was adopted at. You're talking about somebody with autism who may find it more difficult to trust and to bond with others initially, and here are these people that you've called your parents suddenly turfing you out. You are no longer able to see the people that you called your brothers and sisters anymore. It's very, very, very strange. I can understand and empathize completely in that it can be very difficult when you are a parent of a child with additional needs. You need a lot of support. You need a lot of help from other people. You know, you need to have a multidisciplinary team coming in. I'm not negating that fact at all. You know, I think, you know, it shouldn't be a thing of parents should be going in and doing everything themselves. It's very, very difficult. I totally 100% appreciate that. Like I said, I have worked in the field for quite a few years, and you know, it's not easy. It isn't. But to give up a child, it seems very strange. Like, I don't understand why they didn't even just go first for like respite care to get some help in that sense. I don't know if they even went to getting an early intervention team or anything along those lines. It was very, very, very strange. And I can only imagine as well for their actual biological kids what sort of a message that's sending to them. Like, here's somebody that they had called their brother and he's now gone. They said that it was because he was a danger to the other kids, to which I'm like, I don't understand why you didn't have somebody come in and maybe put in a behaviour support plan or kind of help with that, because again, they were making a lot of money off him. I don't mean to be crass, but they were. They had featured him in a lot of videos. They had gotten a lot of subscribers down to the adoption. So I don't understand why they weren't kind of putting money into his treatment and helping him. Now, when I say treatment, I don't mean that you can cure autism. By no means you can't. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. You will always have it. But, you know, you can increase quality of life, increase independence, social skills, speech and language. He could have had like an OT come in and help him with any sensory needs that he had. But that doesn't seem to have been something that was necessarily looked at, which for me is just really sad. Like, really, really, really sad. And I can't imagine how difficult it must be for the other kids to see mum and dad essentially give up their brother and not necessarily understand why. Like, it seems very weird to me. Taking a taper blending brush and I'm going into this shade here. So he's apparently with another family now and he's apparently bonding really well. They're an Ohio family, so actually it had gotten to the point where the police were actually involved because people kind of said it was potential child endangerment and abandonment, etc., etc. Now, they have since left that case. They aren't worried about it anymore. I'm actually quite glad in a way that he's got a new family, because it seems like, and don't come for me, it seems like they weren't willing to do the things that were necessary to really help him achieve his full potential. And I get really annoyed about that because I work with people on the spectrum and I have a lot of family members who are on the spectrum, and I get that it's difficult when you are with a kid and you don't know what it is that they need or they want, and it can feel really frustrating that you don't know how best to help them. But that's why you engage in you know, help from professionals and ask them to come in and help you out with these particular things. You know, you don't need to do these things alone. And if anything, they were in a better position than most families in terms of like even just financial support. I know of families who have remortgaged their house just so they can ensure that their kids get the help that they need to. to engage in the supports that they need. So this excuse seems a little bit, like, even me calling it an excuse is, sorry, like, it just, to me, it reeks of an excuse. I'm using this brush here. It's the Jessup 226, and I'm going into the green. But yeah, it's something that kind of stuck with me. And like I said, as a kid who has been adopted, I'm so grateful. I was adopted by fabulous parents, very, very biased. They fed me well. But at no point did it feel as if that love was conditional or depended upon me presenting in a certain way or being a certain way. And it's interesting because what they have done with this kid, I would imagine, even makes their biological kids potentially feel a bit wary because it feels like, well, if you don't present in exactly this way, we could get rid of you. And like I said, that's really, really, really damaging. A parent is meant to give unconditional love, and it is hard. It's hard to be a parent. I'm not negating that fact at all. It's one of the most difficult things you can actually do. Using the same brush again to go into the blue. But the potential psychological trauma they have inflicted on this child, just in my opinion, to get views and to get subscribers and to get financial gain, is completely deplorable. And it's not often that I will go away from being objective, but this is, I think it's because it's something that affects me on such a personal level, that because I, like I said, work with this population, because I myself am adopted, I genuinely do not understand how you can do that. I totally understand you maybe saying it's really, really hard and we need additional help, and can somebody recommend, maybe respite care, for like an evening, or, having somebody come in and help with behavior support plans or something like that. But it seems like such a big move for that. So my major concern with this child is the potential psychological trauma. Pretty much have the eyes done. It's the psychological trauma that has been inflicted upon him, and I would be so worried about the long-term fallout of that. From what I understand, he apparently has a really loving new family, and I'm really, really glad for that, and I hope that makes up for it, that they are able to give him the support that he needs. I hope that they are given the support from the state, because in fairness, what I will say is, if you are in the States, there's actually more supports, etc. available than here in Europe. It's very, very difficult to get a behavioural support specialist in Ireland, for example. That happens to be my qualification, and it is really, really tricky to get somebody with those qualifications. But in the States, there is quite a few, and from what I understand, a certain amount of autism support is actually provided via Obamacare. So it isn't even like a financial drain on a parent, so I really don't get that as an argument. But again, as I was saying, I know parents who have remortgaged their houses to help their kids, so I don't understand how YouTubers who were gaining a huge amount of money on their platform, like, let's be real, they were able to buy a very expensive house, why it was that they couldn't invest money into ensuring that he had a high quality of life. Why is it that they felt that there was only terms for conditional love for this child that they had adopted? My question is, if one of their biological kids suffered from some horrific chronic illness that impacted them in a similar way, like, you could get meningitis in the morning and it could result in long-term brain damage, would they treat their biological kids in the same way? And if they did, that's pretty bad, because it would signal this is somebody who really shouldn't have kids. It is not a conditional love kind of thing. It isn't. You love your kids no matter what, and sometimes it's hard. But if it isn't, then it also signals they really shouldn't be allowed to adopt again. And I know that they are apparently looking into adopting again, and they also want to get another kid with additional learning needs because it performs well on their channel. Again, it's just this, like, using somebody for gain, like they're a performing monkey. It is so gross to me. I do not understand it, like, on any level at all. But if that's the case, I really don't think they should be allowed to adopt. And given the fact that they're even going out of the country to do this, there's a lot of issues around human trafficking and the legality of bringing somebody in from a different country. And apparently there's like really big statistics in America of people rehoming kids from China, which is incredibly worrying, like incredibly worrying. But yeah, I am quite concerned about that, and I'd like to know what the story is moving forward for this child. I hope he does really well. I hope he has like all of the supports there, and that he has a really strong family unit and he's able to engage in a really strong attachment with them. Because as I've kind of said in a previous video where I was asked questions on psychology, I was asked what is the impact of having any sort of a damage to your attachment style, and the thing is, it has major repercussions. However, if you then attach securely to somebody else later on in your life, that can actually help with that. So as damaging as these things are right now, if he is put into the correct sort of an environment, then he will do well. And the thing is, Micah kind of alluded to the fact that he's had a tricky life, obviously, growing up in an orphanage, and he's been dealt an awful lot of trauma, and she talked about that in previous videos before they announced his rehoming. What is he? A cat, apparently. So then to kind of add that on to him, I'm just like, oh no, that's not good. But yeah, that's my little rant on that. I'm gonna go finish the rest of my face. We still have to try on the highlighter and the lipstick, so come back for that, and I will be doing swatches of the palette and giving you an overall idea of what my first impression of the palette is. So don't run away. I need you, and I love you. I'll see you in a bit. I'm back. The rest of my makeup is on, but we still have to play with the highlighter and the lipstick. I even did my hair a little bit. I'm getting it cut tomorrow. I'm very excited. I'm going to look like an actual human being. So actually, the day that I'm uploading this will be the day that I'm getting it cut. So be excited for me. I'm going to zoom you into the eyes now so you can actually see what it is that I've done. Sorry for the fringe. It's gone all over the place. It is what it is. So I'll take the fringe back so you can kind of see it. This is what the eyes look like. It's a very simple sort of a cut crease. I didn't do a huge amount with it. The liner, by the way, that I have on is the LA Splash Lumos Metals in the shade Potion, which is amazing. I really like it. I'll take the glasses off so you can see it a bit better. So that is that. I quite like the eyeshadow. So the next thing I'm going to use is this highlighter, and it is in the shade Scatter. So it looks like this, if the camera can pick it up at all. It's a sort of a lavender shade, and I'll put it on my very pale hand, which apparently can't pick it up at all. There we go, it sort of does. So it's quite a lavenderish colour. Now, I don't normally go for a lavender highlighter, but I was like, Teresa, you don't have this in your collection. You should probably add to it. So that was my rationale for that, and I'm sticking with it. So I'm just going to take the Sigma, I think it's the F03. Yeah, F03 High Cheekbone Highlighter, and just go, woo! Oh, wow, okay. I actually quite like this with this. You know, how much highlighter is too much highlighter? No such thing. It's a trick question. I've already semi-ruined the design on it. Oh well. Makeup is meant to be used. I quite like this. Is it a natural looking highlighter? No. But who needs that? Who needs that negativity in their life? You know? I like that. That's pretty. And I got a lipstick in red, because it's me. What shade exactly is it? Chimera. So it's this kind of pinkish red, but honestly, when you see it off camera, it looks more of a red. So yeah, let's try that. I do like the Lethal Cosmetics liquid lipsticks. I've tried them in the past when I tried the Jolina collection, so it is nice. That's quite nice. I like a red lipstick, obviously. Not on my teeth yet. Winning! I like the way all of this has come together. I mean, obviously I look like a Victorian corpse bride because I'm so pale. But that's just the way I am, guys. It's just the way I am. I like the way the eyeshadow came out. It performed really, really nicely. But now let's get some swatches and we can see what they look like. So the palette itself looks like this. The mirror, by the way, has a date on it, which is May 1992, May 14th to be specific, 8:23 p.m, which I think is quite cool. I never bother taking the plastic off these because I never end up using the mirrors. But let's take the first row and swatch them and put them onto my pale arm. Now I've already used 3 out of 4 of these, so let's see. That's very pale, so you can't see it that well. Oh, I mean, look at that. Does that not just make you want to weep? That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm just getting like swatches all over the place. And now for the next 4. I've got a lot of Lethal Cosmetics eyeshadows. I do really enjoy them. And I like that you can build your own eyeshadow palettes with them. Like, I think that's very smart. They're a German-based company. There we go. And on to the very last row. So let's get swatching. Thank you for focusing, camera. There we go. So that is the full colour story of the After Dark palette. It looked like it was going to be a pastel palette, but I actually think it packs far more of a punch than a regular pastel palette. So I really, really enjoy that. So now let's actually talk about what I think of each of the products. I'm going to start with this because I have it right next to me. It is, of course, the After Dark, if you haven't guessed it, and it came with stickers, and I haven't actually decorated it yet because I get a bit anxious about decorating things with stickers because then I'm like, oh, they aren't new, and look, I have a whole thing around it. I was so weird as a kid that when I get stickers, I wouldn't take them off of the thing. I'd keep them onto the laminate background. Look, I don't make sense as a human being. It was like a weird anxiety thing. So what do I think of this? Interestingly, I was talking to my friend Kelly the other day when this arrived, and I showed her this and she was like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of this as being a palette for you that you would necessarily go for. And I was like, yes, it isn't necessarily my typical palette, but it's definitely filling a void that's in my makeup collection, which is insane to think of because I have a ridiculous makeup collection. The green, beautiful. You know how I feel about greens. All of them performed really, really well. There was no problem with blending. It was such a quick, easy application. I didn't go for anything wild or adventurous on the eyes, although some would argue that like a cut crease is quite tricky. But even with these shadows, it was so easy to do. And granted, now I only used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the 12 shadows, but that is still like, that's 2/3 of the palette. And I was very, very impressed with it. So for me, I would very happily give this a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10. There's nothing that I can really fault it on. I really, really enjoyed it. It blended really well. The quality is really, really strong, and it is a nice little German indie brand that you can support at the moment. I mean, look at that colour story. It's so pretty. Very happy to recommend that. The next thing is the highlighter in... Well, it says wavelength pressed highlighter and then it says scatter on the back. So I'm not really sure as to exactly which one it is, but it is this sort of a lilac-y colour. Again, I'm showing you this as if you can properly see it, but because of my lights, it isn't coming up the best. I don't normally go for shades like this, but you can see it's turned up really nicely on the skin. Please excuse my terrible blend. That's just me not knowing what it is that I'm doing with makeup. Look, you know, we're all friends here. It's fine. My God, my fringe is taking over my face. What is it doing? This I would very happily recommend as well. I would give this maybe an 8.5 out of 10. The reason why I'm taking some marks off is I think it is a little bit expensive for what it is, because I think you can get comparable highlighters that are just as good for a little bit less, but I am happy to recommend them. This, oh, sweet merciful Zeus. Well, I love a red lipstick. I can't help it. I always gravitate towards them. I am really impressed with the Lethal Cosmetics liquid lip formula. They are so friggin' comfortable. Like, it doesn't feel like I have anything on my lips at all. Like, at all. It's very, very comfortable. This I would give a 10 out of 10. Just in terms of comfortability, the opaqueness of the colour, I think it's really, really nice. So, in all, I'm really happy with everything that I got in my little Lethal Cosmetics haul. So, hurrah for me. That is the end of the video. Do please like, comment and subscribe because it's nice. I'm trying to grow my channel, and the more people that engage with this and stuff, the better. Do please share, because sharing is caring, unless of course it's an STD, in which case, you know, wrap it up and try social distance, I guess. I don't know, are we still doing that? Who knows? But that is it. That is the end of the video. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.